Okay, so I have been getting a bunch of people in my comment section on both TikTok and YouTube Shorts telling me that my horse is cold when I leave her in -5 degrees without a blanket on. So I thought that today we could talk about some ways to actually tell if your horse is cold. Okay, let's talk about how to tell if your horse is cold. All right, so the number one way, and you've probably guessed this already, is your horse shivering? Now, just because your horse isn't shivering doesn't mean that they're not cold. A human can be cold without shivering, but shivering is a pretty good sign that your horse is cold and needs some help. So if you've never seen a horse shiver from the cold before, think about what it looks like when a horse shakes a fly off of themselves just by twitching some of their muscles. It basically looks like that, but their whole body. Like, you'll be able to tell if you're like, oh, I don't know if my horse is shivering, you'll be able to tell if they're shivering. So that's your number one way. Can you come here, Polly? I need to show them your butt. Now, another really good way to tell if your horse is cold is by looking at their tail, and she's not giving us a very great angle here. Let's see if I can adjust this a bit. All right, that's a bit better. Keep in mind, standing behind your horse is not the safest option, but this is for educational purposes. So if your horse is cold, one thing that you're very likely to see is them tucking their tail. That's the opposite of tucking your tail. So this is one of the body language things you have to look at. It's very common along with the hunched posture you might see. So think about, for humans, we tend to huddle ourselves up, hunch our posture when we get cold. It's just kind of our natural instinct. Horses do the same thing, so you can look at their whole body and see, oh, do they look like they're kind of hunching their shoulders in? Do they look like they're really tense? That's one way to tell if your horse is cold. And they'll do the same thing with their tail. So right now her tail is just kind of relaxed. If we were looking for a tucked tail, it would look more stuck in like this. Now with her, it's hard to tell because she does have a docked tail, so she doesn't actually have as much control over her tail. Her tail ends, where is it? Right there. It should be more like here. So you would see on the average horse, their tail would be tucked in like that. That's a very good sign that they're cold. Now, what a lot of people will tell you to do to tell if your horse is cold is like touch their ears, and if their ears are cold, then they're cold, or to touch their skin, and if their skin is cold, or if it doesn't feel warm, then they're cold. Now, you can do this, but it's not the most reliable way to tell how warm or cold your horse is. And that's because it's all completely dependent on how warm or cold you are. If your hands are warm and you touch them, they're probably going to feel cold or colder because your hands are warm. Or if your hands are cold and you touch them, they're probably going to feel warm. So you can do this, it's just not necessarily your best option. What are you doing? Okay, Polly was being really patient and she really wanted to come eat grass, so we're going to let her eat grass. So this isn't specifically about whether or not your horse is cold, but one way to tell if your horse is thermoregulating and insulating properly is if snow is resting on top of their hair like this, or if it's melting. If you're wondering why there's so much there and like none here, that's because she was wearing the blanket, so that's from when she was wearing the blanket. But you can see even here, now she's got snow resting on top of her hair. That's a very good sign. That means that her body is insulating itself properly. If she was not, then the heat would be escaping out of her hair and it would be causing all of the snow to melt. And a horse that is not thermoregulating or insulating properly is a horse that is most likely cold. All right, we've covered a bunch of physical signs, body posture. Let's talk about behavioral changes. So if your horse is cold or getting cold, you might see some behavioral changes in them. One of pretty obviously would be seeking shelter. Is your horse going to find some shelter? Now, just because your horse is trying to find shelter doesn't necessarily mean they're cold. If it's really windy, they might just, the wind chill might be a bit much, and so they might just be trying to break the wind. Doesn't necessarily mean they need a blanket or anything, but seeking shelter is one behavioral change you might notice. Another is whether or not they are huddling together with their herdmates. Now, again, this is a pretty normal herd behavior. Doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be wearing a blanket, but if they're feeling like they're getting a little bit chilly, they might huddle together with their herdmates. You might also notice a seriously increased appetite. Your horse might be, the second you turn them out, they're running to go get that hay and they're reluctant to leave the hay, they're gorging themselves. And like we talked about before, horses digesting hay is one of the best ways for them to keep themselves warm. So that might be why you notice an increased appetite, particularly for forage versus grain or, feed products. You also might notice your horse being reluctant to move. If you've ever been super cold before, you know that you kind of just want to sit there curled up in a ball, you don't really want to get up and move. And so, you know, you might be trying to bring your horse in from the fields and they might be like, you know what, I really don't want to move. I actually would prefer to just stand here. And that's probably because they're cold, their joints might be stiff. I get a little bit of that with Polly sometimes. It's not because she's cold overall, but because we think she's got some arthritis in a couple of her joints. And so, you know, they get stiff in the cold, and so this just takes a little bit of encouragement to get her moving. And then she's like, oh, once she's walking for a minute, she's fine. But you might notice your horse not wanting to move, and that might mean that they're cold. Also, my hand is not as cold as it looks. I think it's, I don't know. Look at my nails. I got my nails done. I haven't gotten my nails done in like 10 years. It's crazy. It's really weird. I don't have my computer with me, so I can't check my notes, but I think that was pretty much everything that I had on my list. If there are more ways to tell that your horse is cold that I did not mention, please feel free to leave a comment and let me know and let everybody else know. All right, I'm just crouching down here for a second because I got a little lightheaded, felt my heart rate spike. So we're just gonna sit here for, well, not sit, I'm still on my feet, but for a minute just to get my bearings back. It is super important to be aware of how your horse is feeling temperature-wise, whether they're warm, whether they're cold, what they need, when they need it, and, you know, when they need to be blanketed. I think it is really awesome that so many horse owners obviously care so deeply about their horses and making sure that they're not cold, but with that comes a lot of anthropomorphizing our horses. It's important to remember that there is a difference between loving your horse, caring about them, seeing them as a member of the family, and treating them like a human, which they're not. They don't need the same things as humans, and giving them the same things as humans as a human would need them can actually cause more harm than good. If you're not sure when your horse needs a blanket, when they don't, do a ton of research. There are lots of great articles you can read, podcasts you can listen to, videos to watch, and quite honestly, it's a lot of trial and error. My first 2 winters with Polly were tons of trial and error of what kind of blanketing program or system worked best for her. And one of the biggest things that I learned was basically 99% of the time I think she needs a blanket, she doesn't. Which basically means 99% of the time she doesn't need a blanket. Now that's not true for every horse. Lots of horses do need blankets a lot of the time in the winter, but just not all of them. And we tend to over-blanket a lot of our horses. Now there's nothing inherently bad about blanketing your horse when they don't need one, so long as it's not causing them to sweat. But your horse might actually be more comfortable without one, allowing their body to thermoregulate the way that it was designed to. Horses are really, really cool creatures, and they've evolved to be able to withstand temperatures that we can't. A lot of them anyways, not breeds that are like from the desert. But even those breeds, a lot of them that have, you know, their bloodlines have been in Canada or, you know, northern US for several generations, they've actually adapted really, really well to the colder climates. It's really important not to get stuck in the I'm cold, they must be cold mindset, because the reality is they're really not. Anyways, hopefully this video is going to help put the online internet keyboard warriors and horse experts at ease. My horse is not cold, she's okay. She doesn't always need a blanket, she does really well without one. She would much rather keep herself warm by just gorging herself on hay. I really, really love making educational videos like this, so if there's a topic you'd like me to cover, please let me know. I love sharing all of the knowledge that I have gained over the past, you know, I don't know, nearly a decade of being an equestrian. In the past, how long have I owned you? 2.5 years? The past 2.5 years of being a horse owner. And when I don't know the answer to a question or I don't know something, I am honestly so excited to do more research, just crazy amounts of research to help answer your questions. All right, she's getting covered in snow and she is perfectly happy. All right, that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until I see you guys next time, please remember to think critically.